Welcome to this playlist, which is devoted to a reading and better understanding of the book Ascent of Mount Carmel by St. John of the Cross. And today we're on the third book, the 43rd chapter. And this is the final chapter in some manuscripts of Ascent of Mount Carmel. However, in my copy of Ascent of Mount Carmel, there are 2 additional chapters, so we'll be discussing those 2 also. In this chapter, St. John tells us that the attachments that some people have toward praying in certain churches, such as those that we've been discussing in the last several chapters, are perhaps excusable to a certain extent, since those people generally act innocently. However, the way some people use novel ceremonies and incorporate them into their prayer lives, that's a worse practice. St. John tells us that in this chapter he's not talking about ceremonies of uninstructed people who stray from orthodoxy. For a modern example of what he's referring to with this reference would be Santa Muerta. St. John tells us that those types of ceremonies are clearly evil and involve sin, and he assumes that this is so obvious that we already know this, so he moves on to a more subtle evil. What St. John is talking about are the ceremonies that people with good intentions might use as motivations in prayer. I wish to speak solely of those ceremonies of which many people make use nowadays with indiscreet devotion, attributing such efficacy and faith to these ways and manners wherein they desire to perform their devotions and prayers, that they believe that if they fail to the very slightest extent in them or go beyond their limits, God will not be served by them, nor will he hear them. They place more reliance upon these methods and kinds of ceremony than upon the reality of their prayer, and herein they greatly offend and displease God. St. John says, I wish to speak solely of those ceremonies of which many people make use nowadays with indiscreet devotion, attributing such efficacy and faith to these ways and manners wherein they desire to perform their devotions and prayers, that they believe that they must be at such and such hour, and neither sooner nor later. Well, we've already discussed the Divine Mercy devotion at length. Well, what do you think St. John would think about the insistence that the Divine Mercy chaplet must be said at the 3 o'clock hour? As often as you hear the clock strike the 3rd hour, immerse yourself completely in my mercy, adoring and glorifying it. Invoke its omnipotence for the whole world, and particularly for poor sinners, for at that moment mercy was opened wide for every soul. In this hour, you can obtain everything for yourself and for others, just for the asking. Of course, it's a good thing to remember our Lord's Passion. That's what the Rosary's all about. But to suggest that he won't listen to us just as well at other times, well, that seems contrary to Catholic teaching. St. John continues and advises us that the errors he's referring to include the need to say prayers in a certain manner, with the belief that if one point is missing or certain limits have been exceeded or that there's been a deviation in a certain formula, the prayer's of little value. So as a result, these people put more trust in their formulas and methods than they do in prayer and in God. What is intolerable is that some people desire to feel some effect in themselves or to have their petitions fulfilled or to know that the purpose of these ceremonious prayers of theirs will be accomplished. This is nothing less than to tempt God and anger him greatly, so much so that he sometimes gives leave to the devil to deceive them, making them feel and understand things that are far removed from the benefit of their soul, which they deserve because the attachment that they show in their prayers, not desiring God's will, rather than their own desires to be done therein, and thus, because they place not their whole confidence in God, nothing goes well with them. Well, I hope you enjoyed this installment of Ascent of Mount Carmel. We'll be back again in about a week with another one. But in the meantime, please check out my Facebook page, which is linked down below. Every day I post content which you won't find on this YouTube channel. And please, pray for the church.
Mercy, mercy, babe. Ooh, Lord, have mercy on me. I done somebody wrong.